Okay, so what I want to talk about are chemical reactions. So chemical reactions. Okay, so a chemical reaction. What exactly is that and what's happening? One of the words that I would associate with a chemical reaction is the word change. You're getting a change that happens. Now, if we have a look here, so what we're looking at is a fireworks display. So if you think about like what change is actually happening here. So if you think about you have your firework, okay, so imagine it's a solid like this. It has a fuse. Inside here you have some kind of powder. Okay, you light the fuse. Okay, the fuse burns, and then in the air you have oxygen. So particles of oxygen. And what happens is they react with each other, and the oxygen and the particles that are in the fireworks display, they change, and you get this kind of change here that's happening. So you get something like this. So you get a change. Now within chemistry, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to kind of think about what is actually happening here, like what is causing. So we have matter that is like this, and then it goes and it ends up like this. Okay, so you have reactants. Okay, so you could say that the firework and all of this here are what are known as the reactants. Okay, and then they react, and then there is some kind of product. There's some kind of a product that's produced. Okay, and what's happening is like going from here to here, there's a clear change that's taken place. So it started off like this, and it ended up like this. So this is what's known as this is would be in a very simple sense what we mean by a chemical reaction. There's a physical change. There's a change. Okay, so that what you started off with. So you started off with a firework, which is powder, for example, inside some kind of a case and tubing, and you had fire, the ignition source. So what you started off with is not the same as what you ended up with. You end up with, for example, there's light. Okay, different colored light. There's sound. There's lots of heat. Okay, so you have all of this given off. So you have, and then what you're going to have is you're going to have different so new substances formed. So you're going to get new substances formed. So this is what we mean, just on a very, very fundamental level, what we mean by a chemical reaction. Now, what we can do is we can take this like phenomena that happens that we observe with our senses, like so, and we can write it down on paper so that we can kind of think about what's actually going on here. So with this particular reaction, we have, so one part of the reaction will be, so you have the element magnesium. So you have magnesium. So you have magnesium and oxygen. And they react together. So for example, you could say heat. So that's your ignition source. And what it gives you is this new substance called magnesium oxide plus all of this. Okay, so you get a new substance formed, but then you get all of this energy that's been produced as well. plus energy. Okay, and that energy is in the form of light, sound, and heat, for example. So what you have here, you have on the left hand side here, you have what are known as the reactants, and they react with each other, okay, and then they produce the products on the right hand side. And this here is what starts the reaction, okay, and it's known as the catalyst. So let's just put down these words. So you have on the left hand side here, you have what are called the reactants. Okay, so in this case the reactants are magnesium and oxygen. We have the thing that that got the reaction going, which is known as the catalyst. Okay, and that can be heat, it can be other things as well. In this case, it's like, for example, a heat source. And then over here, then we have what are called the products. So in this case, we have magnesium oxide, and we have energy as well. Now, this is one way. So this here, this is known as the way that we represent this whole thing here is what's known as a chemical equation. So this is what's known as a chemical equation. So basically what we're doing is we're taking this process here of change, okay, out in the real world, which is quite a complicated and complex process, and we're boiling it down and putting it into words. So that we can put it on a page and study it and look at it. And this is what's known as a chemical equation. So there are two main types of chemical equation. So we have this here, what's known as a word equation. So that's basically where you just use words to represent the change that's happening or the chemical reaction. Now I could also write this like so. So I can go onto the periodic table and I can look for the element magnesium and I can look for oxygen and I can write down the details as per the periodic table. So I could say we have magnesium, so its symbol is Mg, plus oxygen, which symbol is O, and oxygen, when in the air, it combines with other oxygen, so there's two oxygens bound together, so it's oxygen, and that will give you magnesium oxide, which is MgO. So you can see here, these have come into contact with each other and they formed a new product. And then you have plus your energy. And you could say heat is the catalyst, is what gets the reaction going. So this here then, so this is what's known, so this is what's known, we call this a chemical equation. And this is what's known as a word equation. And both of these are equations that represent a chemical reaction. Another way that you can kind of think about it as well, you could say like, let's say that magnesium, you could represent it with a little green dot like that. You could represent oxygen, for example, with two green dots like that, because there's two of them. And then when they come into contact with each other with heat, okay, and then what happens is they bind together. So you could have, they connect together, like so, and then you get plus energy. So what's happening is you could think about them as particles, and this is what we mean by. So they're just particles that come into contact with each other. So what would happen is this would have to come into contact with the oxygen. Okay, it rearranges and then it forms this, but then it also releases a huge amount of energy as well. So again, this is like kind of going back to particle theory and thinking about looking at chemicals like so that they react with each other just like particles react. So that's what we mean. So just a chemical reaction. So that's what we mean by chemical reactions. That's essentially what's happening. So you have word equations and you have chemical equations. So just to give you kind of just maybe just some more examples of this. So for example, you could also have, so iron. So for example, iron plus sulfur. And this will give you iron sulfide. Okay, so again, we have our reactants here, and we have our reactants here, and then we have our product here. Another example would be, we could write this then like so. We could say iron, which is Fe, that's its symbol on the periodic table, plus S. Sulfur, which is the symbol on the periodic table, gives you FeS. Okay, so again you have, so that's, it's just another way to represent this. Okay, again you could think about it as you have iron particles that are coming into contact with a sulfur particle, and what's happening is these are coming into contact with each other and they're combining together to form a new product, which is iron sulfide, like so. So that's a way that you can kind of think about it as well and visualize it. So again, so like if you think about it, so a chemical reaction is a change that results in the formation of one or more new substances. Okay, so what happens is when you get a chemical reaction, you get substances that come in contact with each other and they form new substances. Okay, so you get new substances formed. So for example, you have magnesium and oxygen. They're two substances, they come into contact with each other and they form this new substance, which is known as magnesium oxide. So that's what we mean by a chemical reaction. And chemical reactions then can be represented by a word equation that looks something like this, or you can use a chemical equation that looks something like this. And basically you can take this information from the periodic table, for example. And you can think about like chemical reactions. Essentially what it is the change. You get reactants that react with each other and they produce a change. And like a really dramatic version of that is a fireworks display, for example. That is a chemical reaction that's happening. You're getting your reactants, so your magnesium and your oxygen being heated, coming into contact with each other and forming this new substance, which is magnesium oxide, but then also releasing huge amounts of energy in the form of light, sound, heat, and they're forming this new substance as well. So that's just the basics of a chemical reaction and what we mean by a chemical reaction.